Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with fellow podcast host and podcast coach, Roy Coughlan. Roy, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this. I was on your show, boy, probably going on close to 2 years at this point. So,
It was actually a year because I've checked it.
oh,
It
okay.
was it was in March of last year, and it was episode 205 for those that want to listen because we had a fantastic. Because to be honest, it was my first time talking to somebody that's living in an RV life, so it was kind of something I was like, "Ooh, I could do this."
I love it. I love it. Um, yeah, I thought it was longer than that, but that's cool. So you did your research to talk about that. So I love having, being on people's shows and then having them back on my show or vice versa. So I'm glad we reconnected here. And man, you got a lot on your plate, but before we really get into the conversation, just, introduce yourself to the audience. Who is Roy today?
So I class myself as a serial entrepreneur. I've had over 15 companies in 5 countries. I've actually had the companies in, and now I've been podcasting since 2018. I've 6 podcasts, and 5 have been in the top 1%, with 4 in the top 0.5%. And now I help people get on shows, and it's mainly mission based. So the people I'm really helping and getting involved with, one is helping people with anxiety, another helping with alcoholics. So it's all, and a neuropathic doctor. So it's like I like to get involved with these people to make the world a better place.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So tell me, how did you get started in podcasting initially?
So I suppose, like, I'm from Cork in Ireland, and I moved to Poland 17 years ago, and I was doing real estate. I was doing very well. And it was basically I was in a few syndicates. So I was renting property, developing property, and all this. And when the crash happened, I was actually doing well. So I kind of funded a few of the commercial properties, thinking, these guys will get it right, but they didn't. So when it all came tumbling down, I was the president of, I don't know, 5 or 6 companies, and nobody had told me, but I was personally liable. So instead of making 5 million, I was personally liable for 5 million, and
Wow.
kind of, yeah, went through a kind of episode of fighting that. And through that saw a lot of corruption and fraud. And I know this is a long-winded answer to how I got into podcasting, but this is exactly how it happened. So I went to an event, and the event was "What's Your Quest?" And at that time, I said, okay, I want to make it my mission to expose all this, because I mean, we see this is an international thing. So unfortunately, there's families break up, people throwing the towel. I was like, no, we need to expose this. But there was also brilliant speakers. I hated public speaking. I was very shy when I was young. So when I came back, I said, okay, to get my message out, I need to overcome my fear of public speaking. So I joined the Toastmasters Club. Then I joined another one. I formed a club. I became a coach, and I went from being terrified to winning competitions, getting into the final of 5 countries. And then I went to another event, and it was teaching people how to do a podcast. It was like one part of it. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And it was always about kind of exposing the fraud. But I said, okay, I need to learn my skill. So the first one was the speaking podcast, which was the one that you were actually a guest on. And it kind of developed from there then.
Yeah, I love it. And it's one thing to start a podcast. It's another thing to just kind of keep at it. I mean, I think when this show actually gets released, it'll be somewhere around episode 280-ish of my show. I had actually done a previous podcast to this with my old organization, called Stepping Up to the Plate with Big Vision Foundation. I did almost 300 episodes of that and started in 2012. Um, and there's a lot of people out there who, start it and then they do, maybe 5, 10 episodes, and then they realize that the work, behind the scenes. That's the funny thing about my first show. All I did on that show was conduct the interview. I had no idea how it got to the internet. Like I went into a studio, all the interviews were face to face. Had a producer. Um, you know, and I would leave the studio and, would get a link to the show, uh, a week or so later, and that was it. So I had no idea how any of the background worked. Thankfully, when I launched this show, my old producer and another really good friend of mine, who also has a show, kind of showed me the back end of it and how to get it produced and edited and all that fun stuff. So everything that I do now, doing the interview, doing all the editing, just like you do. So I think once people start and they understand the background of work, what goes into conducting an interview, I mean, the homework before the interview takes place, they don't really understand that. So again, there's a component of starting it, but then to keep it going and the longevity of it. You've got 6 shows now, which is completely amazing to me. I mean, knowing the work that goes into one show. So, how do you keep that up? With doing 6 shows and just making it happen the way you do.
I think, well, yeah, apologies for the camera is cutting off. So
No
that's
problem.
these things can happen as well. It's like technology can fail us. And I suppose it's about systems like that. I have everything systemized and I try to plan it out as much as I can. So you mentioned people throwing the towel after 10 episodes, and that's true. I see that the whole time. So even when I'm talking to people, I say try to commit to at least a year. And what happens is a lot of the times people think they look at the likes of Joe Rogan and they think they're going to make a gazillion bucks. And the reality is, when you started your career in anything you did, how much did you make and how much time did you do? So, like, think of this as like an education. If you're doing a degree and stuff like that, and if you build it, you can make money from it. But what I say to people is actually kind of learn your skill, bring value to the table. And when you love it, it's not a job. And eventually then it can start giving you income from it, but don't make that the mission.
Yeah, I love that answer because yeah, if you're looking for a quick fix or you know, making a quick buck, podcasting is not the route to go by any stretch of the imagination. So we can dispel that myth right here. Roy and Dan can dispel that myth right here on the spot. It is not a quick money grab gig for sure. It is definitely something that you're in the long haul. So, like I mentioned, you host 6 shows now. You do all the background work on them as well. Um, you started with the speaking show, and then how long were you doing just that one show? And like honestly, like why in the world would you want to start another show? And then why would you want to start, do 6?
Keep going, exactly. I think it was about 6 months. And when I lost everything, because when I went into the minus situation, I lost my house, I lost my personal belongings and all my investment properties. And I started listening to meditation. So there was a few meditations, like a guided meditation that helped me, and there was other ones. And then they disappeared or they became paid. And when you're watching the pennies, you don't pay for things like that. And I said, I want to have meditation for people free always. And because I've been to so many events around the world, I've got meditations from 1 minute to 2 hours and interview people talking about chakras, different religions, because I never push my agenda down someone's throat. Let people listen and they'll be attracted to what there is. And yeah, that was kind of the second one. That's in the top 0.5% as well. It's doing well. But it's like, yeah, it was just kind of let there be different things out there for people to enjoy. The next one was to learn Polish. So as I mentioned, I moved to Poland, and learning languages was never my kind of thing. I mean, you were asking me prior to recording how many languages do you speak, and I mean, I did French for 3 years in school, and yeah, I can say, my name is where I live, and that's about it. And that's embarrassing when you kind of spend 3 years doing a language. And I was doing Rosetta Stone, Pimsleur, and all these different things. It wasn't really sticking. And I said, eventually, I mean, I got to a certain level. I said, I listen to a podcast. Maybe that will help me with the language. And they were scripted or they were only in Polish. And I goes, no, I can't do this. So with my ex-wife, we have a child together and we're kind of unusual because most people, when they break up, they hate each other. They're just fighting all the time. But we got mutual respect for each other. So we've been doing this, it's 5 years now, I think. And we're close. We're about on the audio alone, 950,000. So next month or kind of May we'll hit the million just on audio alone. The video's over a million. And what I've done is I've created it in a way I like learning. So I show maybe a picture, 8 pictures on a sheet. And like just say if you're going to the mechanic, the different things you'd ask. If you're going to a dentist, what's a filling? What's this? Everyday topics, because usually people are pushing grammar and you get tired with that. That can come later. And it's just kind of get the conversation, because when you're going to the shop, if you're going to the pharmacy, if you're going anywhere, you're just talking. You're not writing proper grammar and everything. And that was my thing. And it's obviously resonated with people that it's become so popular, around the world. It's in over 100 countries.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And again, it's mind blowing. And I'm sorry I keep repeating this. Just, the load that you have on your plate with the 6 different shows. It's just amazing. And man, kudos to you um, for pulling it off, because it is quite impressive. As I mentioned in the intro, you're also a podcast coach. Um, what made you decide to get into coaching as well? As if you didn't have enough to do.
I tell you what happened is it was basically when I was doing the speaking, because I was doing the Toastmaster, a lot of the speeches I was doing was about podcasting, because it was kind of like I knew people would kind of benefit from this. And loads of people were coming to me and asking me, and then I do a workshop. And so loads of people were starting doing podcasts. But what happened is with all these different groups, and when they saw me, people connected with me on LinkedIn and Facebook, they'd all reach out to me. Hey, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. And then I realized people aren't respecting me, because it's not as if they go, hey, you've spent so many hours with me. Here you go. How much do I owe you? And it was always kind of like, because you're a podcaster. And I've actually learned that if you have a friend that's a doctor, we all tend to just expect them to treat us for nothing. Carpenters are help. They're doing for their family. They're doing all the work. And it's like, we're not respecting the person with the trade. So I said, no one's respecting me. So I set it up in the case of that. Like, if you're interested, this is what I'm doing. And it's kind of worked. And, like with all the different shows, what I have is a form as well. And it's like I kind of ask people, hey, you interested in starting a podcast? You interested in, getting on shows? You interested? So that way I'm not selling. People are hitting. I've got sponsorship options. Are you interested in that? And I'm just making it. So when people are coming on, they're already after asking me, yeah, I'm interested. So I'm never trying to pitch. And that way it makes it easy.
Yeah, yeah, it's much more natural than, kind of having that quote unquote set agenda. So I think that's always a great approach. And you mentioned it in the beginning about, um, everything you do is kind of mission based, not quote unquote chasing the money. Um, and I think that's a great way to approach things. And I think it's something that, um, you know, society doesn't, I guess, trust enough is probably you know, I guess that's kind of the right way to put it. But, you know, at what point in your life did you know, really buy into that mission base and understanding that if you're doing the right things for the right reasons, the finances will follow?
I think more after I lost everything, because
Yeah.
I've realized like it was never that because even when I was working for a corporation, like I would talk to the cleaner the same way I talked to the managing director. I was never looking down on anyone. That was never my thing. But I think it was kind of building, get the better car, bigger house, and that kind of thing. And no longer. And it's now about, we see there's so much turmoil in the world. And it's like, can I make a difference with what I'm doing? And I know that by kind of getting behind the people that are making the world better, there's a better chance of doing that. And I always say to people, because sometimes people they throw in the towel because they think, oh, my numbers aren't great. Because they're looking at the big boys. They think everyone's getting millions. They look at the influencers, they think if you're getting 20, even 10, like if you went into a room and there was 10 or 20 or 30 people in there listening to you and they were going to be there next week, would you go in? Of course you would. But people, for some reason, they think it's nothing when they look at it on the screen. And we have to get out of that. And I've seen something just recently, apparently, that half of the podcast is like 32 or something after 7 days is the average. Whereas, loads of people, they think that's terrible. And it's not. And you have to stop. And like, when you're having your conversation, if one person benefited from the conversation, would you like I was listening to one of your episodes. It was what was the girl's name? Jen Drummond. And she got a world record and everything, but it was like just listening to the way the kids called her and everything. It was kind of being in touch with you and intuition, thinking something is wrong. There's sometimes people would they'd listen to that and that might happen to them and their life might change for the better based on that. So that conversation might have changed someone's life for the better. And that's happening constantly. And if we think of it like that instead of what's in it for me, will I get this? Will I get that? I think then the mission becomes better. And I mean, I know yourself. Like, I mean, you've got a lot of you said you 280 episodes by the time this goes out. Like, that's incredible. That's there's very few get to that level. But you wouldn't do that unless you loved it.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely not. And I love, what you said there about if just one person, because man, if we could just hold on to that, because I think we do think of these people who are influencing, millions of people and are getting, all kinds of downloads and stuff, but they too had to start somewhere. So it's just really being patient with the process. And it kind of stems, from the subtitle of this show with many little people in many little places, that if we're all out there doing those little things and changing, one life at a time, like that's powerful, because you got to then take into effect that ripple effect, so if you make a positive influence on, again, if this show makes a positive influence on one person, then that one person goes out and makes a positive influence on one other person because of what they heard on this show. And then, you know, on and on and on, like that is a pretty big effect. It's just not that huge splash. It's the little ripples. And I think if we just hold on to that more so than, making the big bang, um, the world would be a better place in general. And you talked about how losing everything for you helped you kind of refocus, I guess, or have a better understanding, even though you weren't necessarily, um, chasing the dollar, um, solely. You always said you had that mutual respect for, the CEO just as much as the janitor. Um, that process of losing everything. I mean, how did that really, reset you know, your thought process?
I think, and maybe it might help people because it wasn't something that just happened overnight that I got. I mean, it did hurt. I just kind of didn't want to get up for maybe a year, even though you're fighting and everything. But one of the things that I've done, because I know that there's a lot of people struggling as well at the moment with, utility bills and stuff like that. And, just there's a lot of people in debt. And one of the things was grateful. What am I grateful for? Because when you lose something, all you do is think of the lack of something, the lack of something. But when you say, okay, what am I grateful for? I'm grateful for when my child gives me a cuddle, grateful when my friends are giving me a phone call, family that I'm connected with, all the different things, like you're grateful for your RV, you're grateful for your wife, your dog, all these things, but just to acknowledge it. And I think then you start attracting it and you stop thinking of the negative. And the other one is the act of forgiveness because everybody's been, whether it's relationships, whether it's business, everybody's gotten ripped off, our employees or whatever bosses. Everybody has a hatred that's something. And if you're holding that in, they're not thinking of that. And what I've done is like the act of forgiveness. So you started thinking of how to forgive the different people. And I mean, there was a lot of big ones for me. And how I got the bigger ones is I brought him back to a child. I said, we've unconditional love for a baby. And if we can look at a baby and go, that is pure love, something happened to make them the person that they were. Whether they had abusive parents, sometimes the parents were just working so hard that they just let the child hang around with the wrong people. They went down the wrong road. And it just, because of circumstances outside of that baby. And when I done that, I was able to forgive everybody. And I think what I realized is it was like you were poisoning yourself with the anger. And once you let it go, you were free. And then just grateful for everything and just making sure that anything you're doing in life, like the other thing is being present. Because And I noticed that in life for a lot of people. Loads of people, they're in work and they're kind of thinking of their kids or their wife or and when they're at home, they're thinking of their job. They're never present.
Right.
And like you ask, how come I'm getting so many shows done and everything? People can't block out when I'm with my child. It's blocked out. I'm with my child. You're not getting a show. It's like this is my time with my son. I'm going swimming with my son. We're going to the cinema. We're playing darts. We're doing sport. We're doing something. I'm totally present. And if I'm phoning somebody, I'm in the conversation. I'm not trying to do a few things at once. Whereas a lot of people, they're guilty of that. And I think when you're totally present, you actually get more benefit from it. And it's like it fills your love tank, let's call it. And that way, then when you're doing something else, so with the podcasting, I mean, people, it is a lot of work editing and all that, but when you're doing it, you're really focused and you're not lacking something. And that way, you get way more done in the day. And I think time kind of slows down as well when you're paying attention to everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love, one of the things we've learned so much is, since we've been traveling full time is, being able to live in the moment more, to be more present. Obviously the toughest part about what we do is just being away from our family. Um, but one of the things we've learned is that we value that time with them when we do get back to Pennsylvania so much more than we did when they were right down the street. I think sometimes, or a lot of times, you just take things for granted. So if you're just a few miles away, you may still go a month or a month and a half without seeing each other because you take it for granted. You just think that, oh, well, I can get there tomorrow or I can get there next week. Um, and that's one of the things that we've really, learned not to take for granted is that time that we have with our family when we get back to Pennsylvania and really being in the moment and being present. So I think that's a great way to approach things for sure. And going back to what you said about gratitude, um, so important to just start your day off with gratitude. Because like you said, you can, you know, bad things happen to all of us every day, multiple times throughout the day. Um, and if you choose to focus on that bad stuff, like, yeah, it's gonna ruin your day. But if you really, take a step back and look at the big picture and understand that, yeah, you know what, this one thing happened, but all these other good things are happening as well, and focus on that because you really do bring to yourself whatever you're focusing on. So if you're focusing on the bad, more bad's going to happen, and if you're going to focus on the good, more good's going to happen. Call it the law of attraction or whatever the case is, but there is real stuff in that. A lot of people think it's just like, woo-woo stuff, but no, it's real stuff. If you're focusing on the positive things are going to happen. Um, so, you know, kind of shifting a little bit back to, you know, your podcasting journey, starting back in 2017 or 18 when you first started. Um, when you look back at some of your early episodes, um, how have you evolved as a host of the shows?
When I look back, I cringe. I mean, I think you just evolve and obviously get better earphones, get a better. And the reason my camera has clicked off is because I haven't produced the space. So that I've noticed that happens. So that's a shame on me that I didn't have the space on the thing because that can happen. And I thought it was actually the camera. And I have a backup camera, I have a backup mic, I've got the ring light, I've got other. So things like that, the sound quality. Like a lot of people don't listen to what they've done. So what I do, they outsource it and they get somebody to do I don't, I do the editing myself. And sometimes I'll do it at twice the speed. And by doing that, it's obviously, I can still comprehend it. And I could even do faster if it was possible. But a lot of these software systems is the max that you can do. But just by, watching all the different things in editing, it's yeah, paying attention to all the details and things like that.
Yeah. So, I know from being on your show, similar to the conversation we're having here, where it's just kind of very organic. Was that kind of always your style from the start, or did you start off with like a list of questions you wanted to ask, or, how did you do that?
Well, I'd always have a list of questions in you, but doesn't mean that, because I mean, you can go off on a tangent. When I started, they were actually in person. But what I found is, well, one, I mean, I'm living in the middle of Poland, so you don't have that many people that you could be interviewing. But it was because of the speaking, the Toastmasters, that I knew it was easy enough. But what I found is it took a lot of time because they were coming. Most of them were never on a podcast before, so they were nervous. So you were actually having a cup of tea and, cake or whatever and just relaxing them, and then you have your interview, and then afterwards, so it was like half a day for each interview. Whereas now it's like it's Zoom is all the time. And I think, I mean, when I started, people you say, "What's a podcast?" No, I think everyone understands what a podcast is. You don't have to,
Exactly.
you don't have to do that, like so.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the same way, for me, like I said, my original show, everything was in-person interviews. When I first started this show, that was really kind of what I was looking to do, to just really just focus on people that we were meeting throughout our travels and sitting down with them in a campground, having a conversation, whatever the case is. Because we've met so many absolutely fascinating people on this journey. And you know, I always tell people when they say, "What's your podcast about?" And it's like, well, it's just interesting people with stories to inspire, is really what it comes down to. It real everyday people who have incredibly inspiring stories. Um, and I was kind of forced into, virtual podcasting via Zoom through COVID. Um, and at first I resisted it because, I I don't know why for sure, whether it was just unfamiliar or what the deal is, or um, but now I embrace it because there's no way you and I, you being in Poland, me being in the US, would have bumped into each other, you know, in a campground. So did you, when you went from fully, face-to-face interviews to virtual, was there any resistance from you, or do you just kind of embrace and be like, wow, this is a way for me to really expand my guest list?
Yeah, I was kind of, I realized, oh, this is good. And the fact that the quality, and that was my fear that, oh, if it's done online, the quality won't be good, but it's very good. And I mean, you can, like, for example, a lot of my shows are on Spotify, and I used to spend a lot of time editing them, going in and removing all the pause fillers and all that stuff. But with the video version, it doesn't allow you to put in two different ones. And I can split something if something happens, if you need to take out something or postman comes, because you can have a sign on your door, please do not disturb. But yeah, some people they don't care. They think it doesn't apply to them. So I can edit that. But if you want to go in and start editing all these small things, you're talking half a day, or if not a day. So I just put it up raw, thinking, I don't know, will this work? And it hasn't affected. I mean, they're all doing very well. And that has saved me a lot of time as well. Like, with the Polish one, that's goes up as audio, but I put it out on like BitChute, YouTube, and Rumble as video. So, I edit that, but that's 5 to 10 minutes. But before the other ones, I mean, I could have some of the awakening ones. That's where I'm exposing fraud and corruption, but with solutions, they could be 2 hours. And when you're editing that, that was, it could be 3, 4 hours. That's a lot of time. And once that went away, that was free time that I had. And a lot of podcasters, they spend the hours, like there's different systems out there that you can use and you can see their videos. And I mean, I use a form. So I say, hey, what video should I watch? Whatever. Because sometimes you can go into, like, if you had a YouTube channel, I can go into your YouTube channel, but I could look at your 10 worst YouTubes. Whereas if I say, what should I watch? You're going to give me your best material. And then if I start listening to shows you've been on, it gives me plenty of things. So, like, I do prepare, but I like to be in flow as well and just kind of listening and paying attention. And
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't expecting that. And then just kind of, whereas I think some people are scripted. Some people, they have a show where they're just asking the same questions, but some people like that. So you be you kind of thing. That's what I say to people. You do what you feel is right. No, don't think you have to follow a certain person. Just do what you think is right, what you enjoy. And that way the show will just keep building.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that approach. And I'm the same way. I do very little editing of the show, either video or audio, because obviously I put it out on YouTube and on, Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you can find your podcasts. But I agree with you where I kind of like that raw. Now, if video freezes or if I screw up the intro and have to redo it, I mean, obviously I'm editing that sort of stuff out, but I really don't do a ton of editing. I mean, I've done, I'll still do some face-to-face interviews here and there. I did a series of probably about 7 or 8 podcasts when we were at a girls' baseball tournament a couple years ago, and I did them in this, in the stadium area. So, there was background noise and, fans cheering, and you could hear, bat hitting the ball and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't do anything to lower that background noise or to shut it out. It was just, again, that was part of that scenario, and in my intro, I said, here we are, live at so and so tournament, so people knew what they were getting. But I think that just adds to the authenticity when you're just having, that conversation. I mean, I recorded one, the other day where, unbeknownst to my guest, his wife wasn't going to be around. So he was in full dad mode as well. And again, another, full-time RVer. So he's, walking around his RV with his phone, having the conversations. Every once in a while, he's got to mute the phone and, tell his kids to be quiet in the background. And I'm not going to edit any of that out. It's all, it is what it is. And I just think that that adds to the authenticity. And I think you can, like you said, not only just the time that is involved in trying to make a very slick production, I just think it takes away from some of that authenticity. So we're definitely on the same page when it comes to that. Did you ever think of polishing stuff up more, or you're just from the get-go, you're okay with what,
No,
throwing
I
it out there?
was, yeah, like, I mean, because I started doing a lot of lives early on. So we do, like, sometimes on the Tuesday and Thursday night, we've had a lot of kind of famous guests and we do it. And it's like, something goes wrong, it goes wrong. So I was always okay with that. And even, if you're doing marketing or stuff like that, I know some people that they will record something for days to get it right. I do most of my stuff in one take. And now what I've done with the Polish as well is I'm getting my son to do like the Friday episode. And my youngest child, he's 10, like, and he loves it. And there's no take two or whatever. It's just like, I might show him the graphic, okay, well, we're going to talk about this. And he's like, and people are liking it because they know it's genuine. And then we're joking as well, because it's like genuine humor coming in. Whereas when somebody it's too rehearsed, it's fake, and they're just copying somebody else. And
Right.
like, even like a lot of these kind of viral videos, people are just replicating somebody else. And once you've seen it once, they're just copying somebody. And there's so much of that going on. And people can see into it. And when they see authentic and real and raw, I think they navigate towards it because they say, this guy isn't fooling, this guy isn't preparing and writing all this different stuff. They're speaking from the heart. And I think people want to listen to somebody who's genuine and is being honest in what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So what's the future hold for you? Are there going to be some more podcasts down the road, or what,
If I do, Dan, come over to Poland and slap me into the head, please.
so sounds like 6 might be the limit.
Yeah, it's hard, and it's not that I don't enjoy them. It's just that what's actually after happening is I'm after getting a lot of clients from my podcasting, so I'm very busy, and I know that if I try to take on another one, yeah, it's not going to work. And I don't want to walk away from any of the ones I do because I see the value that they bring, and I just see how people are interacting and how they kind of appreciate the different things. So if I kind of turn it off, or I know some people sell a podcast or whatever, but if you sell a podcast, it's just like a different bus driver. He could go off a cliff. So you don't want to do that either. You want to just keep it. So I can maintain it as it is, but I know that I don't want to be doing another.
Yeah. Art, for all of your shows, is there a weekly episode, or do you have some that are a little bit, more further out in between episodes?
Well, what I tell all my clients, and I do it mainly with my Polish one, I'm extremely consistent. And so it goes out on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I put it out a minute past midnight. And so people know it's coming. And the podcasts I listen to are like that. They go out and I go, like, there's one Blind Boy. every Wednesday morning. I know it's there. So I tell people, try to be consistent, but it's hard. Like the crypto, no, I tried to do that one at the weekend and other ones, but because there's so many shows, like, I mean, I think I mentioned, prior to recording, I've got like something like a 5 month backlog with the speaking one. And I don't like that. I'm trying to, crunch that up. So if I had been consistent with kind of like the 3 days, but when you're working with clients and with family and everything, it's not. And with six, it's hard. But I know that my podcast would improve if I was consistent with the six of them. And I encourage everybody, if you've got one show, try to put it out on the same day, or if there's 2 episodes you're putting out a week, put them on the same time all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, this this show actually goes out on Fridays. And then my wife and I will do an episode, with always, when we're on the move. I mean, there are times where we may be in Pennsylvania for a month or two, so we won't do them then. But when we're on the move like this, we'll do kind of like a monthly update of, what our past month's travels were. And I kind of throw those in between, um, where they come out on the first Tuesday of every month. So, and again, why I picked those 2 days, couldn't really tell you. There's no theory behind it. There's no, this is the way to capture the algorithm thing. I have no idea. Those are just the days that I picked to release those. So, but yeah, I do know, there's some people who, when they first start a podcast, it's like they launch the first 5 episodes all at the same time. And I don't know that I agree with that, because I think that can become overwhelming to the get-go. I mean, I think if you build up a backlog of 5 before you start releasing, that's great, because you're going to at least have, you know, those 5 episodes hit before you figure out how much work there is. But what's your feeling on like that philosophy of kind of doing like a blitz early on? I mean, like I said, I am, you know, dead set on just keep it consistent from the start, one at a time. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that.
So the way that I done it is it was kind of release a few fast and then market heavy. And then I paid for a course. I paid a lot of money to do a course trying to up my level. It's like, it was a 3.5 sterling or something like that. And it was the one that was for my fourth show, The Awakening. It was the one show that didn't go into the top of the charts because they kind of said, "Oh, do one a week." And the reason that I tell people, let out, like I wouldn't put 5 out in the same time. I would do like a day, a day. Because if somebody finds you when you're a new show, they're not going to start following you or subscribing if they just see one show.
Hmm,
And I know you'd say, okay, I've got 5 shows. There's a lot of work. Yes. But have about 10 before you do that. So you have 5 going out, and then you have at least a backlog because, you can get ill, you curveballs, life gets in the way. So don't kind of, because I made that mistake with the speaker when I was like getting cocky. At one stage, I was doing one show a week, then I went to 2, and my audience trebled. And I know it was 2 years in, I decided I'd take the Christmas off, and it kind of extended a bit, thinking all my followers that were there waiting happily for me, and it just dropped, because people unsubscribed, and they didn't. I didn't. I made the mistake of not telling them what I was doing. I
right.
just, So if you are taking a summer off, or you're doing seasons, just let your listeners know, because if they're liking what you're doing, let them in on everything you're doing. Don't just
Right.
assume they know what's in your head, because I made that mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned about, you did heavy marketing. How do you market your shows?
What I would say, a lot of the time, we spend so much time preparing, interviewing, editing, and then we just kind of blast it out to Facebook or whatever, and maybe LinkedIn and then Twitter, and then we're off again. And you should spend the same amount of time with the marketing. So that has evolved over the years as well. What's very good is finding Facebook groups that's relevant to your topic. So for example, the Polish one, I'm in about 50 groups. I'm in, foreigners in Poland, the foreigners in Warsaw, Polish in the UK, Polish in Chicago. There's a big Polish people in Chicago. And I'm posting to them groups because a load of the Polish ended up marrying the locals, and they're trying to teach them or their kids. So when they go back to the country, they have a bit of the lingo. So I'm posting to the right group. Same with Reddit. Reddit is a hard one to navigate, but once you kind of find the right groups, you have to engage a bit. And it's like shorts help. Like for example, you just when I create a short, before you just put up the short and think, but then I realized if people like the short, they need to find the episode. And you can't put the episode in with the short because the algorithms doesn't help you. So you do that as a comment, which helps you. The algorithms, when you've comments, help. And it's just kind of figure that out. And some of the shorts, what I have is I have the link in the short. So the Polish one, I have it looking like a Polish flag. So the red and white and the graphic, but I have the link on the thing. And it just tells you where you can find it. And you just kind of play around with that. You'll find different things. Twitter, I mean, I look at a lot of the people with the Twitter because when you're researching guests and stuff like that, sometimes you can have, I mean, I got something like 4,000. Do I get much engagement? Not really. But with the crypto, they share my stuff and then they get a load of it because if their crypto is kind of big in Twitter, so they could get thousands, whereas I get 10 maybe sometimes nothing. So it's just kind of constantly kind of watching it, tagging people as well. I mean, I have that in my farm that you're happy with it. There was only one person ever said no because they were an employee, so they wanted to kind of keep it quiet. Most people are happy because they're trying to kind of grow off each other. So, like for example, no, you tag me, I'll say thanks for being on the show, and you know you're genuine. You do appreciate being on the show, and then my audience is seeing your audience, and it's just kind of you do that on all the social media, and like somebody that knows you might start following me because they like it and vice versa. And it's just consistency.
Yeah.
Just don't do it once and go, that's not working. Just be in the long haul. And one of the things that I started doing, and I wish I had done this from the start, I'm doing this maybe 6 months. When you have a Facebook group, people give a thumbs up or a comment. You can go into the thumbs up and then invite them to the page. And I do that every day. And
Yeah.
that's growing. So then when you're posting on your page, they're seeing it as well. And some of them now are starting to share it on their page. And then they just give them a care kind of logo or just say thanks for sharing or something like that. And like some people outsource their social media. They don't want to be doing that themselves. And nobody's been going to be at your level. So I don't encourage that. I think you should try to do it. I mean, obviously it can get to a certain level where it gets massive, but they should understand exactly what you're doing. You should be sitting over them for a long time to make sure that they're kind of understanding everything. Because what you don't want is somebody's writing something and they don't get it because they're not at your level, and that could hurt you. So I make sure that I'm constantly engaging with my followers.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So you also have sponsorships for your shows as well. How do you go about sourcing your sponsorships?
What I do is I've created like a sheet of what I'm offering. And then when people come on, I say, you interested in the sponsorship, or just reach out to some people, and then I just send them the sheet with the breakdown, and then they decide what they want. Like one is just I use Podpage, and that's like it's connected with the website. It looks really good because it automatically transfers the podcast over, and I use different graphic. And with a sponsor, they have a page and a link, so they can have that, or you can have a next level where they're on the episode, so people can actually at the side of it they'll see the thing. And the third one is where I'm kind of mentioning somebody on my show, and just have the three levels. And at one stage it was like there's nobody biting, and all you do is reduce the prices until it gets to a stage where they're all biting and you can increase it. Don't throw in the towel. Just go, let's do it cheap at the start, get a few bob in. I mean, like there's a lot of affiliates as well. That's another way of doing it. There's people like there's one I had him on a few of the shows is how to win in court without a lawyer. And I mean, he charges something like $250. I get $50, 20% commission, but I've got a lot of it. It's like every few months there's a commission just from that alone comes in. And with outgoings like Zoom and Calendly and all these different things, starts paying for them. And so I think put it out there that you want to start making money, but don't make it your mission. And when you kind of say, how can I actually make more money from this? And try to kind of cooperate with people as well. Like say, just do a partnership. They're promoting you, you promote them. Mightn't be money exchange, but if they're getting you in front of their audience, later then you can start charging other people because your audience has doubled.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things that I love about this whole podcast community is just the synergy, between hosts. Like, um, you know, when we first got together and I was on your show, it wasn't like you were concerned, and you mentioned it just a little while ago when you were talking, it wasn't like you were concerned about, oh, I don't want to have Dan on my show because he's also a podcast host. And what if someone goes and listens to his show and then stops listening to mine? And, vice versa. Like there's no concern of mine if someone, goes and starts to listen to one of your shows. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the whole, podcasting community is it's not competition. It's not about, oh, I don't want Roy to have more listeners than me, or I don't want Dan to have more listeners than me or anything like that. It's like just lifting each other up. Um, like, is that something that surprised you when you first got into it, or were you kind of expecting that? Because everything else in the world, it's all about competition and a race to the top.
I've always been kind of open and sharing stuff. And what I found is not everybody's like that. And there's a load will keep coming back, but you just close the doors on somebody that doesn't bring anything to the table. I know they're coming to your house every day without bringing a bit of bread. And that's happened. There's people been writing books and stuff like that, asking me to do interviews and sharing stuff and everything. And they didn't even post the book to you. Like, and you're going, eh. And it's like the ones that are there and we're kind of helping each other, you just keep helping them. And like we've even shared guests because and I actually never mind mentioning someone's podcast. I love when somebody goes because and if it came to the stage where somebody listens to a certain number of podcasts and they listen to yours over mine, that doesn't hurt me because that's just the way it is. It just
Right.
constantly evolves and grows. And the reality is people are listening. I mean, I don't know how many you listen to. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And you're not listening to one podcast. So, like, I think the more you share, the more it comes back. And what I've learned is because I've been very open from day one, there is a tiny percentage that give me gold. Like they think of me straight away. Hey, there's a new thing, there's a new that, and I'm always ahead. I'm always ahead because I'm always open. And some people they won't give you nothing, and they, like I've got my new one is the Podfather, and it's sharing tips because I want podcasters to last. And I've been on a few shows with podcasters that are doing what I'm doing. They're helping people, and you would think they wouldn't want me on the show, but no, they get me, and vice versa, because we're like, I'd prefer if everybody kept listening to podcasts instead of watching CNN and all these different things because we know they're regurgitating lies.
Yeah.
Whereas you can learn so much more from a podcast and you're connecting with people. So let's help podcasters to keep going.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Roy, man, we talked about a whole bunch of different things. Is there anything that we missed that you think would be valuable to the listeners before we start to wrap things up?
I think just in life, because no matter what you're doing in life, a lot of people, whether they're, whatever job they're doing, whether they're self-employed, employed, just make sure you love what you're doing and don't be beating yourself up because like a lot of us have to-do lists. I mean, I'm guilty at that at times, but what I do sometimes is I have what I've done list and it just changes it. And you'd be surprised the amount of things you get done that you don't write down. And instead of just trying to cross off something, because you'll always have the bigger list and you might get 10, half it done and you're beating yourself up. But if you look at a blank page and you just start writing down what you've done, just change the psychology. Then you go, whoa, I actually had a nice day. Even if you're just ringing your friend, ringing a family member, just doing different things, you go to the gym, right? And then you look and you go, that was a good day. So just don't stop beating yourself up because I think we're all beating ourselves up. You
Yeah.
don't need to be doing that in life.
Yeah. I think that goes back to that gratitude thing. Again, a lot of people want to focus on what they didn't get done in a day, where if you go down and look at what you did get done, it's very impressive on most days, for sure. So I love that. I never heard it kind of put in that way. But that is a great way to look at it and really does stem back to our earlier, conversation about just gratitude in general. So, um, Roy, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to find out more about what you're doing, if they're looking to start a show and need a coach, how do they find you on the internet?
It's bio. bio.link/podcaster. So all my shows and my podcasting coaching is on that bio.link/podcaster.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes as well, and people can just click it from there. So Roy, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of the Michael Franti song Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes. What's one of the little things that Roy does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
I think what I do is I'm mindful and I make sure everything I'm doing is for the betterment of mankind and not the betterment of my pocket.
I love it. I love it. That's a great answer. Roy, I really appreciate you taking out the time to join me on the show. Wish you the best of luck moving forward with everything you got going on. And, again, just thank you so much for the time. It's a great conversation.
Thank you very much for having me on. Totally enjoyed it.
You bet.